And welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Knowledge. On today's episode, we're just going to talk about how the hobby continues to somehow be hot. And I'm also going to have to quote Yogi Berra because it feels like deja vu all over again, in the sense that we're seeing a lot of the similar indicators from the last time the market really popped. And that's, new people coming into the hobby. Sure, in 2020, I was able to justify a lot of it with the pandemic and people not really going out, not spending money on vacations and dinners and stuff like that. Yeah, a lot of people lost their jobs, but also a lot of people kept their jobs. Money in 2020 was really cheap. Interest rates were really low. It was a crazy time in this hobby. The Logan Paul hype definitely helped, but I was expecting to now see a larger pullback than we're seeing. But for whatever reason, we're still continuing to see a lot of new collectors enter the hobby, in my opinion. So it brings up the real question, right? Well, where are these new collectors coming from? And, what's the driving factor pushing a lot of these guys back into the hobby? And honestly, I don't know. I thought there would be some huge indicators out there, like a Logan Paul-esque type situation, but we're not really seeing that. So that means one of two things are happening. The new people, being driven into the Pokemon hobby is a little more organic than we might have thought. And it could be a bunch of reasons, right? Maybe some of the people that had, came back into the hobby and their excitement about the hobby has now brought in other people who they surround themselves with who also want to, get back into the hobby. I've mentioned before, when you have new people or people re-entering the hobby who haven't been in the hobby for such a long time, they don't really have a good understanding of price points for products. So every price point that products are currently at, a lot of these newer collectors will just take these price points at face value and they'll assume that's just what the prices are. They won't really understand the extremely fast run-up we've had on so many products across the board, really especially in the sealed product area, well, graded cards too, but sealed product kind of comes to mind first of just, very low dollar amount just for packs, 2-3 years ago to where we're at now. We're seeing, 10-fold, 20-fold increases in prices. So people might just take a lot of these prices at face value. So if this is the case and people's price memories start to become extremely small, every time you take those price memories and you shorten them a little bit, the price goes up. So if we see price memories start to be so small that even a very, small drop from where prices are now, there will be a lot of buying pressure at certain price levels. And, people that have been in the hobby, we always talk about this, right? We always say, well, Pokemon will never go away because a lot of us have certain price points in mind where if certain cards or certain sets or certain sealed products ever drop to certain price points, we as collectors will pick up everything. But you can also have almost the same exact effect happening with newer collectors whose price memories are so much smaller. So when prices only drop, a very little bit, not even close to what my price target where I would start scooping everything up is, when I'm talking, we're not even close. You could have real strong resistance levels on these prices that the newer collectors who at this point might really not be that new, assuming they've been in the hobby now for, a year or two, and a year or two can be enough time to really get, your footing back under you and really start to understand the market, especially the modern market, because I feel for older collectors, sometimes modern market can definitely be the toughest because it's the market that you have to keep up with the most. When it comes to vintage is easy when you've been in the hobby for a long time because vintage doesn't change. The sets don't change, the cards don't change, the chase cards don't change. Yeah, the prices might change, especially when it comes to sealed product. but the fundamentals have always stayed the same. The populations of what we expect, and I do this in quotations, the, populations of how much of these sets exist for vintage, those populations and our thoughts behind them haven't really changed much in the last few years, especially in the last 2 years where a lot of the newer collectors have come in. And especially, one of the big things a lot of us always look at when it comes to different sets is we're constantly looking at pop reports and stuff like this. A lot of these more vintage sets, we've seen a very, very small change in the pop report, especially when it comes to like PSA 10s for a lot of these cards. The movement has been so little bit compared to what the rest of the market has done. So like I said, sometimes because of those reasons, modern can be a little bit tougher, because with modern, you just have to keep up with the news day to day. It can get a little taxing and it could be a little hard, but then this is where the new collectors might be coming in, and because, to go back to those price points, they only understand higher price points. These retractions we're having now could be a lot of, areas where a lot of product will start to be bought up. So I'm interested in just like that thought process behind it. An area I've always personally been in, which is the raw vintage market. I enjoy picking up lots as best as I can for cheap prices. I don't mind playing the long game to get cards, varying conditions, send them away for grading, waiting months, and at this point it's years to get my cards back. I'm not worried because, like I said, those vintage cards, I don't see the population changing like overnight. So I don't mind being in those cards for the long term. But what I'm also seeing is a lot of the products and a lot of the, call them vintage lots, I'm usually able to pick up really cheap. I'm seeing a lot of buying action in these lots, and definitely a lot more buyers than I normally see. I see in, much higher prices across the board. And this is a lot of stuff I expected to see pullbacks on. So there has to be a lot of factors at play that are all happening at the same time across different sectors of the hobby. So all these indicators, as much as I want to just do the doom and gloom of the hobby, because that's a smart play at the end of the day, right? To only talk about the doom and gloom, you're always preparing yourself for the worst, but you're constantly hoping for the best. And when you prepare for the worst all the time and you only talk about the doom and gloom, that Pokemon's in a bubble, prices are going to crash, there is no tomorrow, it's just today, we're going back to 2000 levels, $100 for, Charizard first editions or some crazy talk. Yeah, sure, that maybe that's not even a funny, drastic joke, but you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of the doom and gloom out there. And I'm feeling, and I've done it too, I've also talked about the doom and gloom because I want to prepare people. I want to make sure people aren't making the wrong choices. But I'm not seeing enough factors for the doom and gloom. And I want to see the factors, and I'm really looking for them, and that's important, right? You should always be looking for indicators of the market starting to retract a little bit. We're definitely seeing the price retraction a little bit with sealed product, and I've talked about this just as recently as my last video, so I'm not going to, beat this to death too much. But we've already seen, sealed vintage product go down a little bit, and a lot of like PSA 10 vintage prices drop. But I've already talked that I thought a lot of those prices were so overvalued, overhyped. And a lot of that, I think, comes down to vintage booster boxes. And I don't know how true this can be, but I definitely think it's a factor. I think that there was a lot of YouTubers out there and just a lot of people in general who hopped on that box breaking train as fast as they possibly could, because all they did was they were blinded by dollar signs. If you can go out there, get like a Team Rocket first edition or Neo Genesis or one of these cheaper of the vintage booster boxes, pick them up, sell packs individually to your listeners, and just make thousands of dollars, just a stupid amount of money. And a lot of people that have been in the hobby for a long time, it really put a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. Yeah, it was definitely exciting to see so many new people coming into the hobby and so many people getting excited, and all this stuff was happening. It was like a perfect storm, right? But at the same time, we were watching people being taken advantage of, and the people that were really getting taken advantage of were the people that were newer to the hobby, who were just paying astronomical prices for these pack breaks. And so what I think might have happened, or at least I hope has happened, that a lot of these box breakers, or people that kind of just hopped on the hype train a little bit when it came to the box breaking aspect of Pokemon, I think a lot of those people have now pulled back a little bit because they feel the pressure that they've been getting from the rest of the Pokemon community. And I think they're even feeling a little bit of the pressure from a lot of their newer collector listeners who are now, making their way through the hobby, and they're becoming smarter, and they're becoming, better collectors and investors, and they're understanding that their money is their money. It's nobody else's, but there's no point for you to waste your money. And I think a lot of people figured out like, oh, these box breaks aren't worth it to me. So I'm thinking that might have a little bit of effect on these vintage box prices dropping, because a lot of that like inflated value, yeah, it was being, created by a lot of people buying boxes for the sole intentions of opening them and selling packs at a huge premium and making very, very easy, very, very fast money. And I am just starting to see that exact pattern that I literally just outlined to you is going to start to happen all over again. And I hope it doesn't, but I do think it's going to happen. And I've explained it before. If you've somehow made it down the YouTube rabbit hole this far, you guys probably are more educated in this hobby than 90% of the people out there. So you have to at least use your knowledge and do your best to guide newer collectors anytime you start to see people making a lot of these very similar mistakes that we've seen happen in the very recent past. And I feel I almost have a little bit of a moral obligation to do my best to lead people in the right direction. That's one of the big reasons this channel even exists in the first place, is because I don't want to see anyone ever get taken advantage of. I don't ever want to see anybody making the wrong decisions. So I want you guys out there to also like keep this in mind, continue to do the right thing, hopefully, in the hobby. I understand that there's a lot of people out there who are going to have the opposite thought of me, that they do believe that the market is on a downtrend. And I think that's a very good thing. I encourage people to be very skeptical of the market, to continue to do their due diligence and continue to make decisions that they think are right. But I gotta ask, like, compared to any other year besides 2020 or 2021, comparing what you consider a downturn to any of those other years, is it still that bad? I hear a lot of people, and I've seen people write it in the comments, that there's product on the shelves now. Product has been staying on the shelves. It could just potentially be that the area of the country I live in, we have a higher demand for Pokemon. I don't know how true that is, because, just this weekend, I went to Walmart, Target, Best Buy, Party City, a different Walmart, and a Barnes & Nobles. And I didn't see any product on any shelves in any of those stores. So you would expect that you should at least have seen a little bit of product on any of these big box retailers. Like I said, maybe it's just an area of the country, but either way, we're still seeing a much higher demand than we have ever seen in the hobby before. Again, with the exception of 2020, 2021. So you have to at least keep some of this in mind and really consider, is the hobby dropping off a cliff, or is it more a slow, gradual decline where Pokemon eventually will hit a lot of means? And I talked about it as recently as my last video too. The pre-orders for Chill and Reigns has been the biggest demand I have ever seen for a pre-order of any set. Doesn't matter if it was like Battle Styles or even Shining Fates. The Chillin' Reigns pre-orders, in my opinion, were much higher. Or it could also have been sellers were not really that sure what they were going to get from distributors. So they also kept their pre-orders to a much smaller number until they got a little bit more of their concrete numbers of what they were actually going to get. I also want you guys not to miss out on opportunities. I still think there's a ton of different opportunities in this hobby in a ton of different areas. So just continue to be mindful, continue to make smart, well-informed decisions. If you believe that this hobby is just at the peak of the bubble and you want to get out, or you want to take a step back and let things play out, there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's, also a very good play. I just have a lot of trouble ignoring a lot of the things that I'm seeing happen right now in the hobby. Even if you want to ignore what's happened with Chillin' Reigns, you still have to look at just the hype that's going to be behind the EV Heroes set and then the 25th anniversary, which the 25th anniversary set, I'm very surprised that we haven't seen a little bit more information come out, or definitely a few leaks of what's actually happening or what that set's going to look like. I know it's a lot of speculation right now, but we don't have any real solid concrete information, which is very interesting too, which just could potentially mean that Pokemon is getting ready to release something like earth-shaking, totally awesome set, which is going to be in tons of demand, hugely successful, hugely popular. You cannot continue to go back in time and reprint stuff. I know for a while, a lot of us talked that maybe we would see a reprint of Cosmic Eclipse. As time has gone by, the chance of that happening has just gotten less and less as the months go by, as the sets get released. And as time eventually progresses even further, even the most recent of the Sword and Shield sets, Sword and Shield base, Rebel Clash, Darkness Ablaze, maybe not Vivid Voltage. We'll probably see some kind of reprint of Vivid Voltage for years to come. But the farther you go, for Hidden Fates, they're still printing it as much as they can because it is such a popular set. So it's just a question of how much can Pokemon go back and reprint a lot of this stuff. If the demand for the 25th anniversary and EV Heroes and Shining Fates and all this stuff, and Chillin' Reigns, which hasn't been released, if the demand for all these sets are there and they're not able to meet demand, which currently they're not able to meet demand. And if you think they're meeting demand for Shining Fates, I challenge any of you guys to go into your local Walmart or Target and pick up an ETB of Shining Fates 2 days in a row. Maybe you'll get lucky one day, but the chance of you going to back-to-back days and having an ETB sitting on the shelves on both days is next to zero. So if Pokemon cannot print to meet demand for these sets, they're not going to go back super far. So what does that mean? It just means that the price for all this stuff is going to continue to rise. Whether Pokemon wants their modern stuff to continue the rise in price or not, there's just no way that they can quell that price increase from happening. And that's just the truth. That's what I believe. And I hope a lot of you guys disagree with me, and let me know down in the comments, because the reason I make these videos is because I try my best to talk out the situations that are happening logically, because a lot of them don't make sense to me. I understand that the way these videos come out is that I'm just hyping up Pokemon nonstop 24/7. But the truth is, it's because Pokemon is continuing to rise. And I really am doing my best to talk a little bit more about the doom and gloom, but it's not really happening. I thought it was going to happen, or at least I thought it was going to happen on a larger scale than it's happening right now. I want to know what you guys think. I want to know your opinions. So let me know down below. But hey, listen, if somehow you've made it to the end of this video and you're not subscribed to this channel, hit that subscribe button. Other than that, hit the like button, and I'll catch you guys on the next video.